Welcome to the Gentleman's Guide to Vampires. Yes, we are back in the world of darkness. However, I expect some of you were hoping that this was going to be one of those old in-character videos where I talk about vampire clans and how they're all a bunch of arseholes except for mine. And I've already done that. There's no point my doing the same thing twice, and especially on this subject, there is already a perfectly good video. I don't know if it's perfectly good because I haven't looked back at it, and I'm sure I say a lot of very embarrassing things. Instead, what I'm going to do is this. Well, Michael, who wrote to me via MatthewDawkins.com, back the world below, physical copy on BackerKit, asked for me to make a video. That was the deal. They wanted me to discuss the Salubri in V5. And I can do that with a caveat. I have not really read Vampire the Masquerade subsequent to my no longer working on it, because I've had other things to work on, and I essentially lost interest, which may sound tragic, but I promise it isn't. I'm playing and running lots of games, I'm still having lots of fun, and it's all right for tastes to change. So while I'm aware that the V5 Salubri appear in the V5 Companion and the Player's Guide, I imagine, I can't attest to what that material says. All I can really say is how I would have presented them in V5. And so that's what this video is going to be about. How would I have created the Salubri, rewritten the Salubri, what have you, for V5? And this may come as a disappointment to some people, but I don't think I would have changed them a huge amount from Classic Vampire. I mean, maybe you can tell there are certain aspects of Classic Vampire that are very dear to me. The Salubri aren't one of them, but there is a part of the Salubri that I have always enjoyed, and it is their clan bane or clan weakness. I don't know if it's the same in V5. I don't believe it is, but this is what it was. If you were a healer Salubri, you could only feed on victims who gave you their blood with consent. If you were a warrior Salubri, you could only feed on them if they resisted, essentially. It had to be an aggressive feeding. And I really liked that. I really loved that idea, because the Salubri, of course, are alternately painted as saints or sinners. Mainly Sorlot, their clan founder, actually gets that treatment. For the most part, they are victims of the Tremere and their greed, and the fact that for the longest time, healer Salubri have been numbered at only 7, and so on. There's various ideas at play there, that the Salubri are on one hand martyrs, maybe penitents. They are destined to suffer for the sins of Cain and their clan founder. So I like that idea that you can see them almost with sympathy immediately, and it even sounds like their clan weakness is somehow good if they're a healer, that they can only feed from people with consent. I mean, in a way, it is just a narrow version of a clan Ventru weakness. It's a feeding preference. And I like the idea, in fact, of a Ventru getting mistaken for a Salubri because their feeding preference is they can only feed on people who consent. And them having to explain, no, I'm of clan Ventru. Okay, yeah, well, show us your disciplines, because that's what happens in games of Vampire, obviously. And all the Ventru has is fortitude, which is a pain, because that's one of the clan disciplines of the Salubri. At least in Classic Vampire, I don't know what their discipline spread is in V5. I don't know. Do they still have fortitude? Answers below. I know in Classic the healers had Auspex, Fortitude, and Obeah, or Valerian, depending on the edition. Anyway, the idea of only being able to feed from people who willingly give up their blood. Yes, it makes the Salubri seem like the goodest of good guys in a world of darkness, but it isn't good. It isn't nice. All it does is open a door for a massive breach of consent, of love bombing, on cult leader behaviour that I don't think most Salubri would even be aware of. And so I would really have played this up in V5. The fact that the Salubri believe that they are holier than thou. They believe that they are martyrs suffering for all the other kindred. And they believe that they are better than you because they only feed from people who give their blood freely. Now, how do they find people willing to give their blood freely? Well, first you've got to meet some pretty desperate people, haven't you? And then you've got to offer them protection or something like that. And then, maybe then, when they're feeling grateful, you've got to ask for something in return. All of a sudden, you've created a transaction. You've become gangsterish by being a Salubri. You've basically said, I will protect you. I will keep you safe. I'll keep you off the street. I'll take you away from your abusive ex-husband. All I need is a little bit of blood. Now, there will be some Salubri who do that without the expectation of blood. Maybe the person they're rescuing says, oh no, fuck off, I'm not giving you anything. And the Salubri will say, well, blessed be, I will still look after you because I'm a Salubri and I've got an entire flock of rejects behind me. But there will be other Salubri who say, well, in that case, I can no longer help you. And all of a sudden, it is still going to be consenting, but with an edge of cajoling, of coercion. Because, in the end, there are going to be very few mortals who just give up their blood without question. Yes, you could make them give up their blood without question if you started meddling with their minds to make things seem normal. So I believe, and again, there's a lot of guesswork here because I should have done the research beforehand. But I believe the Salubri are given presents in V5, and that implies something. And I like the idea of the Salubri with presence. In fact, I would probably replace, well, maybe Fortitude with presence. I don't know. Auspex and Fortitude are an interesting blend. You don't get that outside, at least in Classic Vampire, of the Salubri and the Ventru Anti-Tribu, I want to say. But presence implies an aura. It implies that you can sway people's emotions. How many times do you have to use presence on people before it's no longer consent? Or does the weakness basically allow you to do it? Is it a loophole? This is what I would want to explore with Salubri in a major way. It's basically that the Salubri have deluded themselves into thinking that they are only taking blood from consenting vessels, when in actual fact what they are just simply doing is love-bombing their vessels into thinking that they are consenting. It's no different than giving a victim Rohypnol or doping them up on booze or something like that and then saying, hey, do you want to, in this case we'll say, give me some blood? But you can see the coercion parallels there with other actual real-world crimes. It makes the Salubri pretty fucking nasty. And I like that. I like the Salubri having the holier-than-thou aura, but in actual fact being disgusting little cultists and giving the Tremere a pretty valid point behind this clan, this bloodline. They're not good. They're pretty awful. They consort with demons because they can get those demons to make victims run to them and give up their blood for protection. It's a sort of mutually beneficial arrangement. Not that all Salubri consort with demons, but the Tremere are certainly keen to tell others that they're infernalists. The Salubri, that is. The Tremere don't often dob on themselves in that way. So that is one aspect. I have always loved the idea of Salubri as cult leader. I think it's malicious, it's malevolent, it's twisted, and it fits nicely in the world of darkness. That's how I would style the clan's weakness. And yeah, if I was looking at their discipline spread, if I was to work them into V5, you do have the issue of the condensing of disciplines. I don't think it's so much of an issue because I think the Salubri should have their own discipline. Yeah, I know that is a somewhat controversial view given that I'm one of the people that came up with the idea of Oblivion absorbing obtenebration and necromancy. But hear me out. The idea is no clan should have a unique discipline, because it starts making snowflakiness. That wasn't my idea, but that was an idea that the team had. So I would still have Valeran, the Salubri discipline, but of course it isn't unique because it's split across Salubri healers, it's split across Salubri warriors, And I think you could make a fairly good go of even twisting a little into some of the more obscure bloodlines. Hell, you could probably make Valeran take blood sorcery away from the Banu Hakim if you want, and give them Valeran instead. I mean, it explains why the ties between both clans are so close. Although then, of course, the Tremere are the only ones with blood sorcery thaumaturgy, so you have the same problem. But anyway, I think giving the Salubri their own unique discipline is actually a good thing, because there are supposed to be so few of them. They are a holdout from a lost time. It's a gentle nod to previous editions, and what's more, it basically makes their rarity stand out. It makes people want to seek them out, not just as victims, but also as people to learn from. I don't think there's anything wrong with making them special, especially given how few of them there are said to be. Now, you need to change that slightly, maybe, if you are making them a populous clan, as broad as any of the other Anarch or Camarilla clans. But I think if you're keeping them as a persecuted bloodline, giving them their own discipline actually works out okay. It works to my tastes, anyhow. I would, in terms of the vampire sectarian nature of vampire, would I have the Salubri join one sect in totality? No, I don't think so. There would be no good reason for them to join the Camarilla, because the Tremere are still there, and I think the idea of them having an active persecutor is still a good plot beat, even if it is carried over all the way from 2nd edition Vampire the Masquerade. It isn't exactly new, but I think what that can do is push more Salubri into the Anarch space, and the Sabbat space, which is where they were going with the Revised Edition, or the Warriors were in the Sabbat. The problem with the Sabbat, of course, is the fight against the Elders, the Methuselahs, they're antediluvian. I don't know that the Salubri have much of a need to do that. I mean, it was one of the things a lot of people were excited about, I remember, with the Revised Edition, playing Salubri Anti-Tribu in the Sabbat. The philosophy behind joining the Sabbat for the Salubri Anti-Tribu was always a little hazy for me, given that Sorlot is expected to have been destroyed. So I think they fit the Anarchs and Autarky better, personally. Now, it's interesting, speaking about feeding with consent, if I were to change their weakness entirely, let's say I didn't want them to just have a narrow feeding restriction, I might actually change them fundamentally to have mutated. I mean, this is a real off-the-wall thought, but it's just because I've been working on Curseborn a lot into making them more emotional vampires. But I think you could make a Torridor-esque bloodline that does that. The reason I'm thinking of this is because in Curseborn we have a family of the Hungry called the Blackhearts. And the Blackhearts, while they can subsist off blood, when their damnation triggers, they need to drain someone's emotions, potentially turning them into some kind of drone. It's one of the antagonist types. Likewise, with the various families of the dead lineage in Curseborn, you have different dead families that enjoy or need to evoke different emotions in the living in order for them to thrive. And for instance, you have families like the Mavens who need things like sort of desperate hope and joy, and you have the Shades who need sorrow and despair. This ties in kind of with that idea of making your vessels feel a certain way. In the case of Salubri, it is they need to feel a certain way toward the Salubri. They need to give up their blood. And let's look at the Salubri Anti-Tribu for a moment there. They always need to take blood by force. What a... good. That is quite some dynamite there as a plot beat. It means you are never really going to have blood doles hanging off of you unless you have mentally indoctrinated them to be terrified of you or terrified of running away from you. And at what point does the person you've beaten and broken start giving their blood to you willingly because they are afraid of what you will do to them if they don't? It becomes an interesting conundrum, a horrible, abusive conundrum, but a really interesting one to explore from a role-playing perspective. So yeah, in answer to the question, how would I handle the Salubri in V5? It's like that. I would really hammer home them being grim and grisly and seductive and delusional, because I honestly think it fits the clan so well, and also makes the idea of them being vampire Jesuses drift away from anyone who gives them too much scrutiny. It puts them almost more in the ministry, followers of Set camp of vampires than, let's say, the Ventru or the Banu Hakim or something like that. And I like that. I like the idea of there being two aspects of faith among vampires, or clans of faith. You have the healers among the Salubri, and you have the almost ascensionists among the ministry, because the healers, the Salubri, want you to be whole. They want you to love them. They want you to see the world as it truly is. They don't want you to suffer. Whereas the ministry feel that you need to suffer to become greater. I mean, what a wonderful kind of analogy there for things like Baptists, evangelists, Catholics, and so on. You know, you've got different strains of Christianity that are going to tell you, you know, feel whole in yourself, and others who say you need to seek penitence, you need to feel guilt before you can feel better. Yes, that may be the followers of Set, who aren't strictly Christian, or aren't Christian at all. But anyway, I'm getting off on so many tangents. Hopefully this has been interesting to you. Hopefully it allows you to portray a Salubri in an interesting way. And if you like anything that I've been talking about, especially as concerns the Blackhearts or the Dead families from Curseborn, where we get to explore some of that real grisliness, do check out the link below for the Curseborn Kickstarter, because you can get notified when it goes live in October. We would love to have you on board. Thank you very much for watching, and stay tuned for another video. Bye bye.